Hello, I'm Michael Burke. Every year, unclaimed estates worth millions of pounds are handed over to long-lost relatives. For some people, it means a knock on the door they'll never forget.
To find that you're part of an inheritance is quite a shock.
I didn't think it was 1.3 million.
Finding forgotten families is the job of the heir hunters. They use genealogy to locate the next of kin who are in line for unexpected windfalls.
You are Virginia?
I am.
A visit from the heir hunters can change lives.
Suddenly to be thrust into this new family, it's been a real roller coaster of a ride, it really has.
I feel very proud of my father. He went through such a lot to give us what we've got today.
You never know when they might come knocking at your door.
I'm at Finders International, where I'm told the team have taken on a seemingly ordinary case which uncovered a lifelong passion that could lead to unexpected riches.
Ryan, what's this case?
Well, this is the case of John Powney. This was picked up from the government lists. He was 68 when he passed away in 2016.
How much did he leave? What's at stake?
Well, we don't really know in this case. For a lot of cases, we can do a search through the land registry and figure out whether someone owned their property. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case with John Powney.
So the obvious source of a big estate, a property, a valuable property, wasn't there. Why did you take it on at all?
Well, that's correct. I mean, obviously, in an ideal world, every case we work is going to be high value, but, you know, sometimes we'll pick up on a case, maybe if the surname looks a bit easier to work. You just never know if someone's going to have a potential small fortune squirreled away.
What information did you have on him at the start?
Well, the information is quite limited. We had John's name, his date of birth, his date of death, his place of birth as well, but there was a key bit of information missing, which was his marital status.
So you didn't even know that?
We didn't even know that. So, I mean, it's very important at that stage to figure out, you know, was John married? Is there a potential spouse, an estranged spouse who could inherit from the estate? If he was married, is there any potential children that would have a prior claim towards other beneficiaries?
So the search was on, but very much from your point of view, a shot in the dark.
The search was on. We were taking a massive risk in terms of value, but we were going to keep our fingers crossed that we weren't going to be too strung out on this case.
With little known about John's close kin, the team hoped tracking down his former neighbour, Margaret Smith, might reveal clues.
I knew John. He lived next door to me for 36 years. I think he was just such a quiet man. He didn't socialise with anyone.
But Margaret was able to provide some valuable clues about John's relationships.
John never talked about his family, no, apart from he once told me that he'd had a wife and he was divorced. Other than that, he never mentioned any other family.
However, it's clear to Margaret that John's passions may have been elsewhere.
He always was telling us about music, and he would say if his music ever got too loud or anything, just to let us know that he didn't want to upset any of the neighbours by having it too loud. But to be honest, he was never any bother to anyone.
Learning that John was previously married, Ryan and the team had to verify the information.
We established that he married Olive Jemski in 1969. The most important thing for us from that stage was to try and figure out what happened to Olive. We figured out through the indexes that she actually remarried in 1986. Therefore, we didn't have to consider her as a beneficiary, but we did have a number of years with which to consider potential children of John, and these children would be entitled to inherit from his estate.
A search through the birth records didn't turn up the early result Ryan was hoping for.
We'd established that John wasn't survived by a spouse and he didn't have any children.
So the team were now on the hunt for any brothers and sisters that John may have had by first tracking down his parents.
OK, let's try and, if we can order that, just in case we have some problems tomorrow with finding her marriage. So a search for a marriage for the deceased parents shows how unusual the combination of the surnames Powney and Rain actually are.
With those names, Ryan found what he was looking for.
John is the only record that comes up in the birth indexes. So we're at a stage where we're looking at the maternal and paternal families.
The team now needed to cast the net wider, and as they began to search the family records, they made a fascinating discovery about John.
Listed on his death certificate as being a record dealer, so maybe this was a hobby of his throughout his adult life.
John might have been an unassuming man by day, but out of hours, he led a far more interesting life on the northern soul scene. Radio DJ Dean Anderson shared a love of unique and rare records with his friend.
I met John Powney back in the early 80s. It was through a mutual friend, a friend of mine. He kept talking about this guy who had all these great records. John, being very private, didn't put himself out there. And my friend said, look, you know, he said you can come round and have a look at some records and, you know, probably do some trades.
That introduction was the start of more than just a friendship.
John became a cult figure. He'd found some good, obscure soulful records. DJs would end up, you know, getting his records. Where did this one originate? Oh, John Powney.
Although Northern Soul records could be profitable, for John, it wasn't just about the money.
He just loved soul music, and by chance, by default, because he was buying so many records, he just happened to have some really good, obscure, rare records that became very valuable.
So, if John's records were part of his estate and were rare enough, it could mean that there would be a sizable amount of money to inherit. For John, the Northern Soul music scene fueled his passion for collecting.
Northern Soul was black music, the Motown sound, and that black music would be soul rather than blues.
In 1970s Britain, Northern Soul centred on a few venues, and one in particular.
In 1973, it found a home in Wigan at a crumbling Victorian Edwardian era dance hall called Wigan Casino that started doing all-nighters. And this really became the foundation stone for everything Northern Soul.
This underground music scene attracted all types of people, including John Powney.
John was the kind of guy who went round the nooks and crannies of Britain just buying soul records. So he bought lots of things, all kind of nice items secreted away, and I'm not even too sure that John Powney knew that he had them.
The rarity of Northern Soul records means they could be extremely valuable.
The Tiffany's on a Philadelphia label, that would be £100. Alexander Patton on Capitol, 300. JT Carter on Decca, 150. The daddy of them all, the £25,000 at least record, Frank Wilson, Do I Love You, on the original Soul record label.
A potentially large collection of records could increase the value of John's estate considerably. So the pressure was on the team to track down his heirs and sign them up fast. In the London office, Ryan was searching for maternal aunts and uncles. If they or their children were alive, they could be in line to inherit.
If I can leave you to look at the maternal side.
Okay,
and then just let me know.
Yep.
It's always a bit of a panic to begin with, wondering if you're behind the competition. Like, every minute does count. It's a bit of a cliche, but it does.
We were able to find a birth record for Alice Rain, the deceased mother, from locating her death record as Alice Powney in 1984. This gave us Alice's full date of birth. We were then able to go back and find her parents.
Alice's parents were John William Rain and Barbara Fisher, and once the team had their names, they began to look for any other children they may have had.
From this search, you can see that Alice had twin brothers, John and Thomas Rain, and it doesn't look like there were any other siblings to this marriage.
With a potential lead, the team searched the records on the twins.
We immediately started with John Rain, who was born in 1914, and sadly found a death shortly afterwards, also in 1914, which shows that John was an infant death, and therefore our line of inquiry stopped there.
Hopes now rested on the other twin.
So yeah, we need to go back to those, really.
If Thomas had survived and gone on to have a family of his own, they could be heirs in line to inherit John Powney's potentially valuable estate.
When the heir hunters take on a new case, the outcome is often far from certain. But with each twist and turn and revelation in the research, they get closer and closer to finding a potential heir. But when the historical documents they're researching are wrong, it can cause no end of problems.
In the London office of Celtic Research, Hector Birchwood and the team were looking into the estate of Alan John Lewis, who died in 2014. The case was advertised on the government's list of unclaimed estates, and Hector took a strategic approach in taking on the search for potential heirs.
With this particular case, what drew us to it was that there was a common name and a common surname that was widespread throughout the United Kingdom. So we thought very few people would want to take this case on.
And the commonality of the names wasn't the only issue with this estate.
When we started to work the case of Alan Lewis, all we had really was a date of death, a last address, and a date of birth.
For the last years of his life, Alan lived in Bramble Lodge Care Home in Middlesbrough, where the staff got to know him well.
He had a nice smile. Alan was really a lovely man, loved from everybody in here. And we were really upset when he died.
Alan was just, he was just a lovely person, and he just liked his own company and very quiet and got on with everybody.
But it seemed, except for the nursing staff, it was a lonely time for Alan.
Alan never talked about his family or his personal life. He never talked about anything like that. That is why I don't know that he had family, because nobody came and visited him.
He died without leaving a will and with no known family. In London, Hector Birchwood had begun the search for any possible heirs.
The first step that we had to take on this case, as with every case, is try and locate the birth of the deceased. We were dealing with a very common and widespread name, so this was going to be the main challenge.
Hector called in the rest of the team in order to help tackle that popular name.
Hi, yeah. Would you mind doing a couple of searches on Alan John Lewis, born in 1947? Yes, the certificates we had, they didn't come out right. No, we're still not able to find or confirm his birth.
With such a common name and no solid leads to connect him to a date of birth in a specific town, Hector had to try a different approach to get ahead of the game.
Despite searching in the usual way, we couldn't find a birth record, and that left us with three other options. Either he was born abroad, he changed his name, or perhaps he could have been adopted.
So Hector shifted his focus to looking into adoption records, and after much searching, his hunch paid off.
So once we found his adoption, then we were able then to take the case forward. But really, it was a laborious task. This is the adoption record of Alan Lewis. The important information that we get from this record is the date of birth of the deceased, i.e. Alan John Lewis, 24th of October, 1947. This concurs with the death record so that we know that we have the right person. The next piece of information that we get are the names of his adoptive parents, Edgar Lewis and Margaret Lewis.
This was a big break, as the team had now tracked down the names of Alan Lewis's adoptive parents, a childless couple from Durham. Edgar Lewis, a 44-year-old mine worker, and his 40-year-old wife, Margaret Lewis. To make the search simpler, under the law, the team didn't have to search for heirs from Alan's biological parents.
When someone is adopted, they legally leave one family and join another. So if you have, for example, a person who is the deceased in a case and they are an adoptee, you trace the adoptive family, not the biological family. Because once they were adopted, they lose the rights from the biological family, but they gain the right to inherit through the adoptive family.
Hector and the team then had to establish if his adoptive parents had any other children. If so, they'd be in line to inherit.
The next step was to see if he had any other siblings.
After a search of the records, it turned out Alan's mother had been previously married, so any children from that relationship could be the beneficiaries Hector was looking for.
His wife Margaret was married first to an Alfred Williamson. He was a boat repairer who died shortly after their marriage. They didn't have any children, but we still had to check. And the reason for that is that they would be entitled to the deceased estate.
Having confirmed that Alan's adoptive parents had no other children, Hector and the team now had to broaden the research to other members of the family.
We had to trace all the maternal and paternal uncles and aunts and see if they had any descendants.
And while the other members of the team focused on the maternal side, Hector concentrated on the paternal grandfather by searching for Edgar and Margaret Lewis's marriage certificate.
Edgar Charles Lewis gave his father's name as Thomas Lewis.
With the grandfather's name listed as Thomas Lewis, yet again Hector faced an uphill struggle, with both a common first name and surname to go on.
Have you found a record for Thomas Lewis yet? No, nothing at all.
As they waded through piles of records for Thomas Lewis's, they hit hurdle after hurdle and became increasingly concerned that something important wasn't adding up.
What was the problem in this case?
We couldn't actually find an Edgar Lewis of the right age in the right area who was the son of a Thomas Lewis.
How frustrating is that for you?
Very. What we were able to find was an Edgar Lewis of the right age in the right area. This is his birth certificate.
OK, there we are, Edgar Charles Lewis. But the father is not Thomas Lewis, but actually the same name as him.
Yeah,
Edgar Charles Lewis.
This is Edgar Charles, son of Edgar Charles.
How do you explain that the deceased father didn't know his father's name?
We found a record of this Edgar Lewis in the workhouse in London at the age of 3.
3?
3.
In the workhouse?
Yes. He was shipped off out to County Durham to be a coal miner at 6.
6?
So here,
down the mines at 6?
Yes. But what this shows is that this person was institutionalized right from the beginning. So he may have been given the name Thomas Lewis at the workhouse, or he may have just made it up to show he wasn't illegitimate.
So he goes down the mine at the age of 6, and he stays down the mine?
He does. I mean, this is the adoption certificate for the deceased Alan Lewis, and it shows Edgar Lewis, coal miner, as the father. So he.
And this is in 1948.
Yeah.
But that does at least help towards proving that you're on the right track. It's the right Edgar Lewis.
Yes, it does.
But the lives people had to lead, within a century of our own.
Hector was keen to unravel the mystery of Alan's father's tragic childhood. The team were now certain they had the right name for Alan's grandfather, an Edgar Charles Lewis, and found a marriage record for him.
Edgar Charles Lewis, Sr., and his Nora, otherwise Nora Barry, married in 1898.
But when Hector looked into Nora's records further, there were even more surprises in store.
From looking at the records, by the time that Nora and Edgar Charles were married, Nora already had 2 children, Annie and Amelia, both of them born illegitimately in a workhouse.
So Alan had half-blood aunts, and there was the potential for more children. And Hector still didn't know the value of the estate. It could be a big gamble for him and the team.
Every year in Britain, thousands of ordinary people get an unexpected knock on the door from heir hunters.
Things like this don't happen all the time, do they?
Over the years, the heir hunters have given fortunes to the heirs that they find. As well as the unexpected windfalls, they also reunite relatives.
I have got relatives out there that I didn't know anything about.
There are still hundreds of estates left unclaimed. Listen carefully for the names. If you recognise yours, then one of them could rightfully belong to you.
Today, we've got details of 2 estates on the Government Legal Department's unclaimed estates list. The first case on the list is Eric Francisco Ferrigno. He was born in 1918 and married Georgina Young on the 14th of December 1942 in Carrickfergus, Northern Ireland. Georgina died on the 23rd of November 1982, followed by Eric in 1991 in Southend-on-Sea, Essex. Perhaps you're part of Eric's family of Ferrigno. The next case is Mary Frances Cantello. She was born in Lambeth, London in 1923. Her maiden name was Spillard. Mary married Ray William Cantello on the 21st of September 1972 in Portsmouth. Mary died on the 22nd of June 1990 in Sherborne, Dorset, aged 66. Could you be a relative of Mary?
If so, the windfall could be coming your way.
In London, senior case manager Ryan Gregory and his team from heir hunting firm Finders International were searching for beneficiaries of the late John Powney, a record dealer who died at the age of 68 in 2016.
He did tell us a lot about his music because he was really passionate. It was the thing that he loved in his life.
In the course of their research, the team had discovered that John had been a key figure in the popular 1970s Northern Soul scene and had amassed a potentially valuable record collection.
J.T. Carter on Decca Promo, £150. The daddy of them all, Frank Wilson, Do I Love You, Indeed I Do, on the original Soul label, worth at least £25,000.
Camilla was focusing on Alice Rain, John's mother, in the search for heirs who could be entitled to inherit any windfall.
We were able to find a birth record for Alice Rain, the deceased mother, from locating her death record. From this search, you can see that Alice had twin brothers, John and Thomas Rain. We immediately started with John Rain, who was born in 1914, and sadly found a death shortly afterwards, also in 1914.
Although Alice's twin brother John had died at birth, research into the other twin, Thomas, looked good.
We were able to find this particular marriage here, which shows Thomas Rain marrying a woman called Stella Cutter in 1939.
As the team searched the records to find out if Thomas and Stella had any children who would then be in line to inherit, Ryan delved into John's father's side of the family.
Because John's father, also called John, was born in 1906, our first point of call was to search for him on the 1911 census. We did pinpoint him with his family.
John Powney's grandfather, Thomas Powney, married a Lizzie Ann Smith in 1905, and by the time the 1911 census was taken, they had 4 children. But Ryan noticed something odd.
Only John and 2 of his siblings were actually listed. Conducting further investigations into the 1911 census, we can see that Margaret Powney, Margaret was the other child that wasn't with the family, the Powney family. She's actually living with the Smith family. So Margaret's basically living with her grandparents in 1911, and it's just a reminder that the census wasn't a full record of each family. It was just happened to be where people were on the night of the census.
John Powney's grandfather, Thomas Powney, and his wife Elizabeth actually went on to have 7 children. Although Arthur died as an infant, all of John's other 5 aunts and uncles had gone on to marry, which meant there were now a large number of family lines that might result in heirs.
When we're researching a big family tree, it's a mixed bag for us. I mean, there's going to be times when we're not going to be contacting everybody before the competition. They could be researching a different part of the family tree. But, the flip side of that is there's an awful lot of research for us to do in the office. The bigger the family tree, the less likely it is that we'll be able to contact everybody first.
While the rest of the team searched John's multiplying family.
So we're trying to locate everyone who'd be entitled to inherit.
Ryan focused his attention on one aunt in particular.
So we already knew that one of the paternal aunts was called Mary Ann Emily Powney. She was born in 1918. We then conducted a marriage search and figured out that she married Oswald Dodson in 1938.
Finally, Ryan and the team came up with the result that they'd been waiting for.
So it looks like I've located the correct person then?
Yeah, the guy lives in Australia, so we sent something to him.
We conducted a birth search. We found 3 children to the marriage between Mary and Oswald. 2 of those were Anita and Diane. We then had to conduct a further marriage search to find out they had changed their surnames. But once we had all those details, we were able to then go into the in-house residential indexes we hold and locate their addresses. Is this
his last known address? Says...
The team had got their first heirs, and they wasted no time trying to contact them.
Hello, good afternoon. It's Ryan Gregory at Finders in London. We're a firm of heir hunters and we're looking into the family tree.
You can call me on the telephone number and just ask for Camilla, and hopefully I'll be able to help you with it.
So we're at a stage now where we're going to go and visit some of the beneficiaries.
Ryan has dispatched his travelling researcher, David Otley, to Bedfordshire in a race against other competitors to get to and sign up John Powney's cousins, Diane and Anita. If David is pipped at the post by a competitor, all of Ryan and the team's work in the office could be in vain. His first meeting is hopefully with heir Diane.
How are you? David Otley. Nice to see you.
Pleased to meet you.
I'll come and see you about your inheritance.
Oh, could I ask what did he pass away with?
I don't know the actual details of the bereavement. We can get a copy of the death certificate from Camilla, so you can have a look and see what actually passed away from. He was married and divorced. Olive Gensky was his wife. I believe she died. She passed as well, but they had no children between them.
Long before, and he didn't have any family or anything?
No, we didn't. I hope they've given you as much information as we can. Any more information that you need, please contact Camilla at the office. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much yourselves. Have a safe journey back.
Right, thank you.
Having successfully signed up Diane before their competitors, David must next go to Anita, John's other cousin.
Well, I do believe we've actually turned up some cousins or some relatives that you weren't actually aware of as well.
Definitely. Yes, that was a big shock, very big shock.
And
thank you so much.
Although they might not have known John, they're still coming to terms with the loss of their cousin.
Deep down, very sad that we weren't with him at the end.
It would have been nice to have had contact with John Powney over the years, because although there's a distance, I'd love to have known the history, his occupation, and also he married. It seems a sad time that we just didn't get to know him more.
With heirs being signed up and everything falling into place, all that's left to do is establish the final value of John Powney's estate. Ryan, John must have been a really important record dealer up on that northern soul scene. Do you know how many records he had?
Well, this is the thing. John had 4,000 records.
4,000?
It's a lot.
And we've been told that, some of these records can be really valuable, hundreds, thousands of pounds. So, how much was the estate worth?
Well, this is the thing. We hear these occasions when someone owns a very valuable item, or in this case, a large collection, and your kind of mind starts to race as to...
I'm multiplying 4,000 records by, what, £25,000?
There you go.
We're actually looking at a large amount of money. How did it turn out?
Well, we think maybe John sold the collection during his lifetime, and by the time the estate was distributed, there was only £3,000 left.
Oh, £3,000? Gosh, that's not going to change many people's lives. I mean, I suppose his collection went on to those people who had a passion for that kind of music. But
how many beneficiaries to split this 3,000?
Well, there were 40 beneficiaries in total, so
to share the
to share the £3,000. Yeah. So I mean, it's nice that we got to know a bit more about John. Obviously, for collectors, it's not always about the money side of things, and obviously he was able to release some of the funds in the later years of his life. But in terms of the inheritance for the beneficiaries, not a great deal.
For John's cousins, Anita and Diane, hearing from the heir hunters is something they'll never forget.
I have friends in Malta and I hope to go for a holiday there, so obviously the money will go towards the holiday.
It's a lovely gesture and I'm very grateful, but under the circumstances it makes me feel very sad that it's from somebody that I haven't kept in touch with.
In London, case manager Hector Birchwood and his team from heir hunting firm Celtic Research were searching for beneficiaries to the estate of Alan John Lewis, a timber yard worker who died in Middlesbrough at the age of 67. However, with the value of the estate unknown, it's a huge gamble.
He gone out with activities. I cannot say nothing nasty about the man because he was so loving.
In their search for heirs, the team had been looking for family on Alan's paternal side, but a mistake on Alan's father's marriage certificate had cost them valuable time and sent them on the wrong path.
Part of that problem was that Edgar Charles Lewis gave his father's name as Thomas Lewis, which was completely wrong.
Having established that Edgar Jr. spent his early years in the workhouse, on the actual records there was no mention of Edgar Sr., leading the team to deduce that Edgar Jr. didn't know his father.
We have a record for him in the workhouse, aged 3 years old, already separated from his father.
Not only that, but Hector also discovered that Edgar had 2 other half-sisters. Alan's paternal grandmother Nora had given birth to a daughter Amelia in 1890 and her sister Annie in 1892, 8 years before she wed Alan's grandfather Edgar. And further research uncovered that in 1891, unmarried and destitute, Nora, then pregnant with Annie, turned to the workhouse as a last resort. Historian Peter Higginbotham can shed some light on Nora's time spent in the refuge.
The workhouse really was the core of the welfare system of the day. It took in individuals, adults, various sorts, the disabled, the chronically sick, mentally ill, single mothers, but also a lot of children.
And the conditions were far from ideal.
The workhouse was deliberately unattractive, uncomfortable, unpleasant. Lots of rules and regulations, and if you stepped out of line, then you could be punished. You could lose a meal, or even be put in a cell for a short period. And you got no help whatsoever as an adult in escaping from that poverty trap.
And Peter has the actual records from the family's time spent in the workhouse.
This is from the Buckingham Palace Road workhouse, and it's the register of births. We've got a birth to Nora, or Honora, as she was formerly known, in the workhouse, and the child is a daughter called Annie. Interestingly, the final column on this register makes it clear that Annie was illegitimate.
Arriving at the workhouse with her first baby Amelia, and now having given birth to a second child, Annie, prospects for Nora were extremely poor.
Had the enormous stigma of not 1, but 2 illegitimate births. And your employability was virtually 0.
But despite the odds, it would seem that Nora's fortunes did take an unexpected turn.
6 years after having her second child, things are on the move for Nora. She marries a gentleman called Edgar Lewis in 1898.
And the couple started a new family in earnest, with the birth of their daughter Amy Lewis the same year.
If we look at the 1901 census, then we see that Edgar has taken on the family and they're all living together. Edgar and Nora, and the 3 children, Amy, Annie and Amelia.
In fact, Edgar and Nora went on to have 2 more children, Mary Elizabeth Lewis, born in 1901, and Edgar Charles Lewis Jr. in 1904, Alan's adoptive father. If these relatives could be traced, they would be potential heirs. But as Hector continued to delve into the records of Alan's other aunts and uncles, he discovered that Edgar Sr. was now out on the streets scratching a living.
Well, interestingly, Edgar Charles's birth certificate gives us his father as Edgar Charles Sr., who was living as a street musician.
Impoverished and with 5 mouths to feed, including 2 girls, Amelia and Annie, who weren't his own daughters, Alan's grandfather Edgar was doing what he could to provide for his family.
A street musician would be someone that earns their livelihood by playing an instrument, by singing, or a very common type of street musician was the organ grinder, where you play a barrel organ.
But life on the streets was hard going, especially when it came to money.
It would be difficult to earn enough to sustain a family as a street musician. In winter, could be catastrophic. It was a very insecure, 0 hours contract profession.
It seems things took their toll on Edgar, Nora and their 5 children, including Alan's father Edgar Lewis Jr., who was then only 3.
Well, all the signs are the family is really falling apart, been split up. The father, Edgar, is in the workhouse infirmary. The older girls are now independent working. And the 2 younger sisters, Amy and Mary, have been taken into the Renfrew Road workhouse, and then after a short time there, they've been shipped off to an orphanage, a Roman Catholic orphanage at Norwood.
With the family now split up and living in various workhouses, a 3-year-old Edgar Jr., Alan's father, would now grow up no longer knowing his own father's name.
We don't know an awful lot about Edgar, other than the fact at some point he moved up to Durham. Possibly the workhouse system organised that. They had various mechanisms for placing children with families through either fostering or boarding out, as it was then called, or even adoption.
Back at the office, Hector had been trying to find out if any of the separated children, Alan's aunts and uncles, could be traced. If they'd grown up to marry and have families of their own, they could be the heirs the team were looking for.
As we followed the paternal line, we looked at the 2 half-aunts of the deceased, Amelia and Annie. We'd found that they'd both been married by 1914. Annie had married John Duggan, and Amelia had married Arthur Stokes. As we traced down the paternal side, we found that Amelia had no surviving children. Her only child died of tuberculosis at age 1.
And when he looked into Alan's first full-blood aunt, Mary Lewis, another of the workhouse children, it wasn't good news there either.
Of Alan's full-blood aunts, Mary Elizabeth Lewis married Percival Parr in 1933, but unfortunately they didn't have any children.
However, when Hector turned his attention to Amy Lewis, Alan's other full-blood aunt, he finally hit on some good news.
Amy married Michael Cochrane in 1920. She also had a daughter, also called Amy, who married John McCarthy in 1941.
And from that marriage, Hector found 8 children.
If we could contact any of these 8 children, we would have heirs to this estate. I'm researching the case of an Alan John Lewis, and I'm hoping perhaps that you might be a beneficiary to his estate.
And after a lot of hard work, dead ends and false information, the team had finally found their first heir. Jean McCarthy is Alan's cousin once removed.
I would have, loved to have met him. It's always easy to lose touch with family, and you always feel you should have more contact with those, even those that are near and dear to you. It's sometimes hard, isn't it?
And although Jean never met Alan, she could verify the details of his father Edgar's early childhood.
I knew very little about Edgar Jr., only snippets of what Nan said when she said that the family was split up because they were destitute at one time, and Edgar stayed with his mother And I assume they had some time in the workhouse. His father wasn't particularly well, but she tried to keep the family together. She was given the option when he was old enough for him to either go to Canada or stay in this country and get some sort of a trade. And they thought it'd be better if they could keep the family somehow in the UK and keep them together, but didn't realise that he'd be sent to the northeast and his trade would be mining, I don't think.
And Jean even has some personal letters from the time.
This is a letter from Edgar Lewis, my nan's brother, to his sister Amelia, that he wrote in 1935. Actually written by his landlady, because he says in it he has to get someone to write for him, so he obviously didn't write, and closing a little photograph of him. So I think this is the only photograph we have of him. And it's quite interesting of its time, really, when he refers to the work that they were doing in the mine, and the fact that how important work was to people in the 1930s.
And Edgar's photograph and letter aren't the only memories Jean has of her family.
This is my granddad, Michael Cochrane, and this is Amy, my grandmother. And these are her sisters. This is Amelia, and this is Annie.
But there was a family secret in this photograph that was only revealed when Jean received a call from Hector.
When I was told by the heir hunters that my great-aunts Amelia and Annie were not my great-grandfather's biological children, I was really surprised, because we'd always assumed that they were. Even though they're considered illegitimate on paper, it doesn't, affect anything within the family.
In London, Hector had finally managed to track down the rest of the heirs in Alan's case. And with a large maternal side to the family, it totalled quite a few.
We had 66 maternal heirs and only 7 paternal heirs. In total, 73 people.
Having found out Alan's estate was worth around £15,000, it meant only a small amount would be divided between the beneficiaries. The gamble might not have paid off financially for Hector and the team, but it was still a rewarding case with a fascinating story to research.
One of the poignant facts about this family, though, is that even though they were broken up while they were in the workhouse system or they were taken away to other parts of the country, is that some of them still managed to reconnect, bring themselves up from the bad situation that they were in, and stay together.
It's been great to remember my grandmother. She was a character, and it was nice to think about her and her sisters, and sad to think what a hard start they had in life and how they came through it. And it makes us realise how lucky we are today.
What an interesting case Alan John Lewis turned out to be. The team didn't have much to go on. They had to get over a lot of problems, incorrect information, missing certificates, to find heirs who, through hard times, had managed to keep most of the family together. Another case successfully completed. Where next for the heir hunters? Maybe it could be you getting an unexpected knock on the door. Until next time, goodbye.